Well, good morning. What is Burning Man? You know, it's funny, I used to get asked that question a lot. Not so much anymore. I don't know. It's still a valid question, though, because it just means so many different things to so many people. If you've ever been to a Burning Man event, show of hands, anybody here ever been to a Burning Man event? Wow, there you are, burners everywhere. You've got a story, and I'm sure it's a good story for you. One thing that I can say for sure, though, is that speaking as an organizer, as a longtime instigator of Burning Man, it's very definitely a city-building enterprise. We didn't start out that way, but along the way we became not just one temporary city, but actually a whole global network of temporary cities. And the unique nature of that, the fact that we build it and then tear it down and then do it again the next year, gives us kind of a unique opportunity to be a laboratory for urban planning, kind of actually more like a petri dish because we have such a short cycle. And over the years, we've learned a few things that I think hopefully will be of use to city makers and remakers everywhere, including here. Plus, like every other city in the world, we were hammered by COVID, and I'll share a little bit of our reaction to that and how we're bouncing back and going back to our hometown. We didn't plan any of this. Burning Man started back in the mid-'80s. It was literally two guys and a hammer. They knocked together a wooden statue out of scrap wood, hauled it down to a nude beach, set it on fire, and just to see what would happen. Well, somehow their little happening just kept happening, and so here we are. It wasn't until the mid-'90s that we started actually thinking about it being a city rather than a camp. And like many of our best ideas, that actually started as, well, at least as half a joke. I remember one late-night conversation, there were probably a couple of bottles of wine involved, where we're trying to boil down the essence of urban life. You know, what's your minimum viable product for a city? And we actually came up with a super short list of 3 things. To be a city, you need, well, plumbing, right? I mean, the Romans knew that. You need toilets or it's not a city. We were actually sitting in a cafe, so we decided coffee was pretty important, because coffee. And the third point, at this point, this is pre-internet, mind you, we decided that we needed a newspaper. Because, you know, you don't want to, like, sit on your toilet in the morning with a cup of coffee with nothing to read. So as soon as we had those 3 things, we boldly decided we were a city. And it wasn't like we did it the normal way. We didn't incorporate or file a city charter. We made a sign. And that's actually the sign that we made. And, you know, it turned into, I guess you'd say, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Today, that's what Black Rock City looks like, or it did the last time we convened back in 2019. For 1 week every year, we are the 3rd largest metropolitan area in the state of Nevada, behind only Las Vegas and Reno. The event takes place on BLM land out in the Black Rock Desert, which is hundreds of square miles of absolutely beautiful nothingness. And then we do it all, we take it all down, bring it all back the next year. Just for comparison purposes, that Pentagon is our city footprint laid over downtown San Francisco, and those are some population figures. So we're somewhere between Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Santa Monica, California. When you visit Black Rock City, you will see all of the things you would expect to see in a city of that size. We have an airport, we have a hospital, we have radio stations, newspapers, a fire department, public transit system, those thousands of green bikes, because since 1997 we have been a automobile-free zone, unless you count these, which are art cars, or as we like to call them lovingly, mutant vehicles, because that led to a great acronym, the DMV, the Department of Mutant Vehicles, which permits these things. That one on the bottom left is my favorite. That's the Never Was Hall. That is literally as big as a house, because it is a house on some sort of funky old steam tractor. Now, there are some areas that are actually quite different. That when you come to Black Rock City, you'll see that there's not a downtown in the true sense of the word. It's much more of a distributed, high-density environment where any place can be the center. There is no main stage. There is no concession stand. There is no merchandise table. But over the years, this structure has evolved to be essentially our downtown plaza. We call it the Center Camp Pavilion. It's about an acre of shade, and shade is a pretty precious commodity out there in the Black Rock Desert. So this has become a great place for people to meet and greet. It's a safe space for newcomers to come in and get acclimatized and acculturated. Most of the hangouts happen in structures like this. Our version of what urban planners call the third places, the not home, not work places, are what we call theme camps. And we have, last count, something like 1,200 of these. And these take the place of what would be retail or community spaces. And they offer everything you could possibly imagine. There are bars, there are restaurants, there are yoga studios, there are spas. But the big difference is they're all free. Everything is offered as a gift to other community members. Now, we do that not because we're Marxists, but because we've learned over time that creating a bubble, even just of a few days, where people can step out of their roles as economic actors, can stop living their lives as buyers and sellers, creates a super ambient feeling, right? People just become more friendly and get to experience life without the constant pressure of branding and sales and marketing. And when we're all done, that's what it looks like. It is the country's, if not the world's, largest Leave No Trace event. So when we're done, absolutely everything, every last feather and sequin is picked up by our permit rules with the BLM. Pretty much the entire event site, anything that's left has to fit inside, not even a sandwich baggie, but like one of those little snack baggies. It's a pretty incredible cleanup effort. And it's all done, for the most part, by the participants. People actually pick up their own trash. One of our principles is leaving no trace, and people take it very seriously. Anything that's what we call MOOP, or matter out of place, people are going to pick it up, pack it out, and take it home. Now, if you think people picking up their own trash is a miracle, how about people building their own city? Burning Man is a massive volunteer organization. At the center where I work, there are about 100 to 120 people who are year-round employees of Burning Man. When we ramp up for the event to build the infrastructure, we hire another 800 to 1,000 temporary or seasonal employees. The rest of it is done by somewhere between 20,000 and 70,000 volunteers, depending on how you count. There are volunteers in the formalized groups, and there are pretty much everyone who builds a theme camp is a volunteer because they're building their own infrastructure, providing their own show, providing their own service. It's just an amazing outpouring of love and support for the culture. Now, every year we actually do a survey of our volunteers to see why they would possibly do this, why they would go out to the middle of nowhere, work hard hours in the sun to give things away. The answers we get are very consistent year to year. Reason number one, they feel they've been given a gift and they want to return the gift, right? It's generosity. Reason number two, they just love the culture and they want there to be more of it. They take on a personal responsibility for making more Burning Man in the world, and they want that to happen. Number 3 and 4, usually a close tie, fun and friends. They find that working with interesting people and making friends is actually fun, even if their job is picking up MOOP off the desert floor. The result of this is that we've created a genuine community. It's a real multi-generational community. We have kids who've grown up out there. We have old people now, sadly, like me. We have multi-generational families out there, right? And it's an exceptionally friendly culture. It's got that sort of small town vibe, but people will actually say hi and help each other out and offer to give each other things, and not just as a marketing come-on. It is a culture of, I would say, of creativity, of inclusivity, of generosity, and of personal responsibility. Now, those aren't values that we make people conform to. They're not rules, they're inspirational ideas, based on a document that we call the 10 Principles of Burning Man. But this was not a manifesto. Unlike any other self-respecting cult, our founder didn't sit down first and say, I'm going to write a manifesto, or I'm going to claim that I found it written on tablets somewhere and make everybody conform to that. No, instead, this document was actually created, I think, 18 years into the project, and it was based on observation. It was Larry Harvey's way of looking at how the community worked and what its operative values were, and he came up with this list. There are, like I said, actions, not values, not really rules, but practices. But you scratch the surface and you can see the values underneath. As I said, inclusivity, generosity, creativity, and personal responsibility are all factors that play into this. It has turned into a global movement. That's a map a little bit outdated of Burning Man groups and events around the world. There are over 100 events that were inspired by Black Rock City. Some of them actually quite large, approaching 20,000 or so participants. Towns like Tankwaru down in South Africa, the home of Africa Burn. Towns like Midburn in Israel, or Pyropolis outside of Austin, Texas. There are also hundreds of regional groups working within existing communities to make life better and more interesting and more creative. One of them is here today. We have representatives from the Sacramento Valley Spark. Any of y'all here today? Well, they have a table out there. You are. Hey, guys. What's up? They have a table outside, so if you want to learn more about the local presence of burners, and maybe even, who knows, maybe you even want to make your own tutu, because today is, in fact, Tutu Tuesday on 2/22/22. I know that's too many twos, but Tutu Tuesday is a real thing at Burning Man, and you might experience it firsthand if you talk to these folks. We've also spun out a great organization called Burners Without Borders that is involved in community resilience and disaster preparedness or disaster relief work around the world. This started spontaneously back in 2015 when a bunch of burners were at our event in Nevada and heard that a terrible hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, had come up through the Gulf. They just packed up all their tools and they went straight to the Gulf and started helping people rebuild. And that spawned a network of chapters around the world doing the same kind of work. And people are starting to sort of study us, I guess you'd say. Academics have a long-time interest in Burning Man, but lately we've fallen in cahoots with the National Conference of Mayors. Even if we're not a real city in the technical sense, they've started inviting us into the conversation and listening to what we have to say. That's a contingent of mayors and city officials who were on Playa last time we were there. I think one of them, some of you may recognize, from West Sac. So what are those lessons? Really quickly, I'm going to talk about 5 things that we have deduced in our little weird Petri dish. The first one is the power of public art. This is no big surprise. Cities all over the country and all over the world are realizing that having large-scale, interactive, playful art in public spaces is a great gestation for community building. From our experience, it's also a great experience for building community in another sense, in that it creates more artists. It takes a village to build a giant piece like that. And Burning Man has organically created this whole ecosystem of art that operates in parallel to the regular art world, and is now starting to get kind of a lot of attention from the mainstream art world. Things like the big Smithsonian Renwick exhibit of Burning Man art, or the recent Sotheby's International Auction of Burning Man art. But sadly, not enough cities, I think, are starting to consider the artists themselves as a valuable resource. There's an all too familiar pattern that I think we've all seen in many places, where artists will come into an area, they will make it beautiful, and then it will get gentrified and they'll get priced out and the artist will have to leave. There are a few organizations working to reverse that artist flight. I'm thinking the Space to Create program from Colorado Creative Industries is a good model. They're looking at ways to, through a public-private partnership, to create artist housing and artist display spaces. There's a similar outfit that just started up in San Francisco called Art House SF. But if you want art, you need artists. Second is the power of temporality, right? Or of, what should we say, of impermanence. Other cities have started to take a few cues from us in terms of just being more agile and responsive about planning and zoning laws. In San Francisco, the parklet movement, which I think now are restaurant lits, aren't they, was an example of that. That whole notion of iterative cycles has led to the fostering of innovation hubs and programs like Free Space, where unused commercial real estate is converted on short term into highly accessible maker spaces, places where people can learn to be artists and manufacture their art. The third is what I would say the power of organic growth, or as we put it, don't overplan it. And that's an expression of humility, because we never could have planned all this. And it's obvious now that the things that came to us are essential features of the city. One example is the temple. When we first started laying out our primitive city, we knew there were things that we wanted and didn't want, but it never occurred to us that we would need a spiritual space of any kind. Not a church, but the temple was first created in 2000 as let's say, a non-denominational place of reflection, and particularly of honoring the fallen and honoring the lost. And now we can't imagine having our city without it. Throughout the course of the week, people fill it with memories of their loved ones, and then at the end of the event, we burn it in a very silent, solemn burn and let all his wishes go to the sky. The artist who came up with the first temple, David Best, has been doing this around the country and around the world in other places that need some healing, whether it was from a school shooting, whether it's from a natural disaster, or actually in this slide, this is from Derry in Northern Ireland, formerly known as Londonderry, a town that had just been ravaged by generations of sectarian violence. He went in and recruited a group of underserved youth, taught them how to build this. They built this on a hill right smack on the line between Protestant and Catholic neighborhoods. And over the course of the week, it became an amazing center of healing and reconciliation. And then the whole city turned out to watch it burn. Fourth, foster interactivity in all ways that you can. The more that you can encourage people to have random encounters with each other, the more it's going to spawn genuine community, new projects, and this is an idea that was embraced for instance, by the late Tony Hsieh, founder of Zappos, when he created the Downtown Project to revitalize a very, very old and abused section of the Las Vegas. He took a lot of our ideas to heart. Actually, we did a consulting project with him and created what he likes to call collision-rich environments, right? Places where people can go and be open to each other and meet each other in genuine ways. Once again, not just as buyers and sellers, not just as co-receivers of some product or service, but in more authentic ways that often involved volunteerism, right? And finally, the power of citizen-centered design. We take a lot of effort to listen to our staff members, our participants every year, and debrief the event pretty thoroughly. We turn into data collection geeks around September or October. Some people call the organization spreadsheet man at that point in time. But through all those afterburn reports, we pay careful attention. We also do a lot of community listening. A few years ago, we had a challenge with some of the camps in town were starting to get a little too rich for their britches and start not quite as interactive as you might like. There were people basically executing what I would call cruise ship culture in Burning Man, right? Coming in, having a posh camp experience and not really being part of the community. Well, rather than just make a bunch of rules, we did a massive listening project that we call cultural direction setting. We received thousands and thousands of submissions. We conducted hundreds and hundreds of interviews and used that process to color our response. Part of which is actually in this year's program, we are making some serious reductions in our on-site services program. For instance, basically you can't get a luxury RV delivered to the playa for you. You can go rent your own RV and drive it in through the gate, but we're cutting back on those services that made it a little bit too convenient and too easy for people to go out and have a bad camping trip in the middle of nowhere, which is one of the What is Burning Man answers. Well, as Michael says, no opportunity like a crisis. When we had to cancel our event in 2020, we had actually already sold tickets. We made the decision to refund them. which meant that overnight we lost 90% of our revenue. You could call that an existential crisis. And about the same time, a lot of other large-scale event producers, like South by Southwest, immediately closed their doors, right, went under. But the opportunity came in a number of ways. First, it was an opportunity to find out exactly how passionate and committed and generous our community members were. We started a community fundraising project, and we had thousands of people give us anywhere from $10 to 7 figures to help us keep the lights on. We got PPP loans, like many of you, I'm sure, did a little bit of trimming of office expenses and managed to keep the ship going. Until, yes, we're coming back. Coming soon to a desert wasteland sort of near you. Burning Man 2022, Waking Dreams. And that theme is all about, as I'm sure you can imagine, waking up from this bad dream or like bad insomnia attack that's been the last couple of years, and getting out there and doing it, right? Meeting our old friends, meeting new friends, and getting out there and creating a world again together, which is what we like to do. I think that's about it, except, oh yeah, if you wanted to go to Burning Man, there are still some tickets available. So I'd go there. I'd look at tickets.burningman.org. Or once again, talk to your local friends, the Sacramento Valley Spark Burners. They might know some ways for you to wrangle a seat on the bus. And what's that? Oh, it's a giant birthday cake. Because it's still Michael Alt's birthday. Let's have a big hand for our executive director, Michael. Thank you, Michael.